never thought my life would come to this. Driving across state lines in the middle of the night with my 5-year-old daughter sleeping in the back seat, constantly checking my mirrors for signs we were being followed. But that's exactly what happened last summer, when my custody battle with my ex-husband turned dangerous. If you'd told me a year ago I'd end up in a situation like this, I would have laughed. It's the kind of thing you see in thrillers, not real life. But here I was, living it. Let me back up a bit. David and I had been divorced for 2 years, but the custody arrangement was still being fought in court. He had money, connections, and a team of expensive lawyers. I had temporary custody of Emma, but David's legal team kept filing motions to challenge it. The whole process was exhausting and terrifying. Every time I thought things might settle, another letter would arrive, another court date. My lawyer, Marissa, had been warning me for weeks that David was getting increasingly desperate. She advised me to pack light, keep my phone charged, and be ready to leave quickly if needed. I thought she was being overly cautious, but I followed her advice anyway. I started keeping a go bag in the closet, just in case. I even taught Emma a little game. If I ever said adventure time, she knew to grab her favorite stuffed animal and get her shoes on. No questions asked. When Marissa called that Tuesday evening, her voice was different. She said she'd heard from a contact that David was planning something, maybe trying to get Emma taken from me before the next hearing. She told me to leave, now. I packed essentials quietly, loaded Emma into her car seat, and drove south out of Seattle on I-5 just before midnight. For the first few hours, Emma slept, her head lolling against the window, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I stayed laser-focused on the road, my hands tight on the wheel. The highway was mostly empty, just the occasional truck or late-night traveler. I kept the radio low, more for company than anything else. Every so often, I'd glance at Emma in the rearview mirror, feeling a mix of guilt and fierce protectiveness. Somewhere near Redding, California, things changed. I noticed a dark blue pickup truck behind us, matching our speed, never passing or falling back for miles on end. At first, I told myself it was just another driver, but after an hour, I started to get nervous. I tried changing lanes, slowing down, even taking an unnecessary exit to a rest stop. Each time, the truck would disappear for a minute, then reappear behind me, headlights steady and unblinking. My nerves were shot. I kept replaying every conversation I'd had with David. I wondered if I was overreacting, if the stress was making me paranoid. But then I remembered Marissa's warning, and the fear came rushing back. That's when I made a mistake. Instead of pushing through my anxiety and finding a truly safe location or heading for a police station, I decided to stop at a 24-hour McDonald's in a small town off the interstate. I rationalized it. Bright lights, cameras, witnesses, Emma hungry and waking. But as soon as I parked, I noticed the blue truck pulling into a lot just across the street, engine idling. Inside, I tried to project calm, ordering Emma apple slices and milk, but kept sneaking glances through the window. The man in the truck stayed in the driver's seat, watching. I debated calling Marissa again, but it was after 3 a.m., and she likely wouldn't answer right away. Emma asked why I was so quiet, and I just told her we were on a special trip, that everything was fine. After a brief rest, I left McDonald's, paid for gas nearby, then buckled Emma back in. The truck remained parked as we left, only to reappear in my rearview mirror minutes later. It followed us for dozens more miles, anytime the highway thinned and the traffic vanished. I started to feel like a hunted animal, every muscle tense, every sense on high alert. Finally, after hours of this silent chase, my nerves gave out. I got desperate and stopped at a gas station in Red Bluff, thinking I could lose him or at least gather more information. Instead, as I finished pumping gas, the truck pulled up close and a man got out, a familiar face from the courthouse, likely hired by David's legal team. He stood nearby, calm and deliberate, watching me. I grabbed Emma and hurried back to the car. Suddenly, a brick smashed through our passenger window. Glass showered the seat. Emma screamed and dove down. I grabbed her and, using a glass cutter I'd packed for emergencies, broke out my own driver's window and crawled outside. We ran into the gas station, begging for help. The attendant called 911 and a couple of customers tried to comfort Emma, who was shaking and sobbing. The truck sped off. Police arrived minutes later, but, with no plate or clear evidence, could only take my report. I gave them every detail I could remember: the color of the truck, the man's face, the sequence of events. They promised to patrol the area, but I could tell they didn't expect to find him. In the morning, Marissa answered my urgent call and told me to file everything fast. She explained that while David's actions skirted legality, a documented pattern of intimidation and harassment could support my custody case. She urged me to note vehicle descriptions, the sequence of stops, and any direct interactions. I spent the next hour writing everything down, every detail I could remember, even the way the man had looked at Emma, cold and calculating. The rest of our drive south was full of anxiety. I avoided any predictable routes, stuck to populated stops, kept my head on a swivel every minute. Emma was quiet, clutching her rabbit, asking if the bad man would find us again. I told her no, that we were safe, but I wasn't sure I believed it. When we finally reached my sister's home in Sacramento, relief washed over me. I broke down crying in her driveway, the adrenaline finally wearing off. My sister hugged me, made us tea, and let Emma sleep in her bed that night. Marissa filed an emergency motion with the courts, presenting all my evidence. 2 weeks later, the judge was persuaded. David was barred from further surveillance, and I got primary custody, with only supervised visitation for him. Since then, I still get jumpy whenever I see the same car, on my tail a little too long. Emma's doing better, but she still asks if we're going on another adventure whenever we pack a bag. I wish I could say I feel safe now, but the truth is, I'm always waiting for the next move. At least Emma is safe, and for now, that's enough. I always figured I'd never set foot in Casper again, not after everything that happened. But when the invite for my 15-year high school reunion showed up in the mail, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I guess I thought maybe if I went back, I could finally put some ghosts to rest. Back when I was 17, just a few months shy of graduation, I got in a wreck that changed everything. It was late, after a party, and I was driving home on Highway 220, one of those endless and empty stretches outside Casper, where the prairie just swallows you up, and the sky feels too big for your own good. A drunk driver crossed the center line and hit us head on. I walked away with a busted arm and a few scars, but Jake and Melissa, my best friends since middle school, didn't make it. I've carried that night with me ever since, like a stone in my pocket I can't get rid of. It was late after graduation. I packed up for Denver and didn't look back. There were just too many memories, too many people asking if I was doing okay, and honestly, I was tired of pretending I was. The reunion invite sat on my kitchen counter for weeks. I'd pick it up, put it down, tell myself I was too busy. But the truth is, I was scared. Still, something in me said it was time to stop running. I loaded up my old Chevy and hit I-25 north on a Friday afternoon, aiming to make it to Casper before the dinner started. The first couple hours were easy, just me, the open road, and a cooler full of gas station snacks. I had the radio on, windows cracked, letting the Wyoming wind blow in, and for a little while, it almost felt like being 17 again, before everything went sideways. But the closer I got to the state line, the more my hands started sweating on the wheel. The sky out there is so big, It makes you feel small, and every mile marker felt like a countdown to something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I kept telling myself it was just nerves, but I knew better. The land started to flatten out, the grass turning that familiar dusty gold, and the clouds hung low and heavy, like they were pressing down on the whole world. About halfway there, the radio started acting up, static, then a song cutting in and out, and when it finally came through clear, it was Freebird. I swear, I hadn't heard that song in years, but it was the same one that was playing the night of the accident, the last song Jake and Melissa ever heard. I tried to laugh it off, switched stations, but a few miles later, there it was again, same guitar solo, same feeling in my gut, like the universe was trying to tell me something. I shut the radio off and drove in silence. But that was worse. All I could hear was the hum of the tires and my own heartbeat, and the memories I'd tried to bury for 15 years. I needed gas about an hour outside Casper, so I pulled into a station I remembered from high school. The place looked newer, but it still had that weird, empty vibe, like time had moved on, but the ghosts hadn't. I got out, stretched, tried to shake off the jitters, and while I was filling up, I caught a flicker of movement in my rearview mirror. I turned slow, not really wanting to see what I thought I'd see, and for a split second, I saw them, two shapes in the back seat. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew Jake's broad shoulders, Melissa's hair falling across her cheek. They just sat there, staring straight ahead, like they were waiting for me to finish up and get back on the road. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I blinked, squeezed my eyes shut, and when I looked again, the back seat was empty, just my duffel bag and a crumpled hoodie lying exactly where I'd left them. I stood there for a minute, hands shaking, telling myself it was the light. Or maybe I was just tired. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen. I even checked the back seat before getting in, just to be sure, and for a second, I almost expected to feel a hand on my shoulder. The rest of the drive was rough. Every shadow on the road looked like someone standing there. Every time I checked my mirrors, I half expected to see them again. I kept the radio off, but the silence was worse. Just the sound of screeching brakes, crushing metal, and Melissa screaming my name, looping in my head. I tried to focus on the road, on the lines blurring past, but my mind kept drifting back to that night, to the way the world seemed to slow down and speed up all at once. By the time I rolled into Casper, I was a mess. My shirt was stuck to my back and my jaw hurt from clenching it. The reunion was at the old community center, all lit up and full of laughter, but I sat in the parking lot for a good 20 minutes, just trying to get my breathing under control. I watched people I hadn't seen in years walk inside, hugging, laughing, like nothing bad had ever happened in this town. Inside, it was like stepping into a time warp. Everyone looked older, but the voices and the jokes were the same. People hugged me, asked about Denver, told stories about the good old days. For a while, I almost forgot why I'd been so scared to come back. There was a table with old yearbooks and photos, and I found myself flipping through pages, pointing out faces, laughing at the haircuts, and the clothes we thought were cool back then. Then came the memorial part of the night. They read the names of classmates who'd passed, and when they said Jake and Melissa, the whole room went quiet. I felt this cold wave of grief, and guilt hit me 15 years later, and it still felt fresh. Not supernatural, just the weight of everything I'd been carrying. I looked around and saw a few people wiping their eyes, and I realized I wasn't the only one who still missed them. After the ceremony, a couple of us went outside for some air. Someone handed me a beer, and we stood in a circle, telling stories about Jake's terrible jokes and Melissa's wild ideas for senior pranks. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged, like maybe I wasn't the only one haunted by the past. The drive back to Denver the next morning was uneventful. No weird radio, no ghosts in the back seat. Just a long stretch of highway and a lot of thinking. I kept the radio on, just in case. But it was all static and country music. The sky was clear, the sun was out, and the prairie looked almost peaceful. I stopped once for coffee and sat in the parking lot, just breathing, feeling lighter than I had in years. I've been back to Casper a couple times since then. I visit Jake and Melissa's graves, leave some flowers, sit and talk for a while. The car's been normal ever since, and I haven't seen those shadows again. But I always keep the radio on when I'm driving through Wyoming, just in case. I guess some memories are too heavy to carry alone. Sometimes in the past finds a way to ride shotgun, whether you wanted to or not. And sometimes you have to go back, face the ghosts, and let yourself remember so you can finally move forward. The decision to move across the country wasn't one I made on a whim. 2 years back and right after graduation, I was flat broke, juggling part-time gigs and living off scholarships. I couldn't afford movers or shipping, so I crammed everything I owned into a rented U-Haul and set out for Portland. 200 miles from Chicago, and not a clue what I'd find at the other end. I left on a chilly April morning, the kind where the city feels like it's still waking up. I double-checked the locks on the truck, tossed my duffel in the passenger seat, and hit play on a playlist I'd spent way too long making. I kept a journal on the seat next to me, figuring maybe I'd want to remember what it felt like to start over. The first couple days, I was running on adrenaline and cheap coffee, watching the city fade in my mirrors and the Midwest open up in front of me. There's a certain thrill to being out there alone, just you and the road. But after a few hundred miles, that excitement started to wear thin. The scenery got repetitive. The exits all started to look the same, and I found myself talking out loud just to break up the silence. I'd lose track of time, miss turns ways, and sometimes forget what state I was even in. By the time the third night rolled around, I was wiped out. I'd pushed myself too hard, skipping meals, and driving longer than I should have, just to make good time. My eyes felt gritty, and my shoulders ached from hours behind the wheel. I pulled off the highway into a town so small, I never caught the name. The only motel in sight looked like it belonged in a different decade, its neon sign buzzing in the drizzle. I almost kept going, but my body wasn't having it. The guy at the front desk greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He started asking about my trip, where I was headed, if I was moving for work or had family out west. I tried to steer the conversation away from myself, but he circled back to the same questions, like he was fishing for something specific. It put me on edge, but I chalked it up to small-town nosiness and just wanted to get my key and crash. The room they gave me was straight out of a time capsule. Threadbare carpet, a comforter with weird stains, and a heater that made a clunking sound every few minutes. I tossed my bag on the bed and sat for a while, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that this was all just part of the story I'd tell later. But the longer I sat there, the more uneasy I felt. The walls were so thin, I could hear every footstep in the hallway, every muffled voice, and something that sounded like scratching coming from behind the headboard. I kept telling myself it was just the building settling, or maybe a raccoon in the walls. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was listening. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I started to drift off, some new noise would jolt me awake. At one point, I was sure I heard someone try my doorknob, but when I sat up and listened, all I caught was the hum of the neon outside and the heater rattling away. I kept my phone close, flashlight app open. When the sun finally came up, I was more tired than when I'd checked in. I packed up fast, wanting nothing more than to get back on the road. But when I got to the U-Haul, my stomach dropped. The rear-view mirror was shattered, cracks spiderwebbing out from the center, like someone had taken a hammer to it. There hadn't been a storm, and the lot was empty, except for my truck and a couple of old sedans. I looked around for someone to ask, but the office was locked up tight, and the only person I saw was a woman walking her dog, who barely glanced my way. I felt exposed, like whoever had done it was still watching, waiting to see what I'd do next. Every car I passed, every face at every gas station or diner, I found myself wondering if they were following me, if they knew something I didn't. I started skipping rest stops, only stopping for gas when I absolutely had to, and always parking under the brightest lights I could find. The rest of the trip was a blur of bad coffee, static-filled radio stations, and endless stretches of empty road. I tried to convince myself I was just being jumpy, that nothing bad was going to happen, but the feeling never really went away. Every night, I'd debate whether the freedom I'd wanted so badly was worth the constant anxiety of being so vulnerable out there on my own. When I finally rolled into Portland, I felt a weird mix of relief and disappointment. My stuff was mostly intact, just a couple of boxes banged up, nothing missing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left something behind on the road, or maybe picked something up that I couldn't see. I unloaded the truck, turned in the keys, and tried to settle into my new life. But for weeks afterward, I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder. Moving wasn't just a change of address. It was an endurance test, a lesson in just how much uncertainty and fear you can carry before it starts to change you. I still love the idea of independence, of going wherever I want, whenever I want, but I don't think I'll ever make a trip like that alone again. Some experiences teach you that freedom has its limits, and sometimes the cost of going it alone is higher than you're willing to pay. Now, 2 years later, I still think about that motel sometimes, about the smashed mirror and the clerk's too friendly questions. I haven't taken another solo road trip since, and honestly, I'm not sure I ever will.